My name is Gerhart Ibrahim. I'm Associate Professor of Management at the AUC School of Business and Director of the MBA and the Executive MBA programs. Also for the past year, I had the honor of serving as the Vice Chair of the Founding Committee for Prime Chapter Africa. Today's launch event runs between now and 3:30 p.m. Central Africa time. If you've just joined in, it's 12 noon here in Cairo, same time. The event takes place over 2 roundtables with a 15-minute in between. I'll be moderating the first roundtable, proudly kicking off Prime's newest chapter. And my colleague, Dr. Ali Aouni, will be moderating the second roundtable on climate justice in Africa. The first roundtable will be a bit longer because we're very happy to have this introductory session that would run around 30 minutes, where we will listen to Dean Sharif Kamil's welcome note from AUC School of Business, opening remarks from Professor Meta Morsing, Head of Prime Secretariat, and Professor Morris Mtombeni, Board Member of the Prime Global Chapter Council. Those joining us, please direct your questions, to the esteemed speakers in the Q&A tab, because we will allow some time in this introductory session to take your questions. Dean Kamil, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sherwood, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are. And welcome to the third edition of AUC School of Business Forum. I hope you're all well and in good health, and I sincerely hope that you will all join us in person come next edition in 2023. It is indeed a delight to welcome you all to today's roundtable, which I think addresses an extremely important sort of pillar of the school, and that is responsible business. Discussion today will focus on the principles of responsible management education. Obviously, as my colleague Sherwood mentioned, we're delighted to host the launch of the Prime Africa chapter. Before I start, I would like to express my delight to be joined by colleagues and friends in this session. Many have had a lot to do with the development of the concept of responsible business in their own domains and in their respective organizations. We will start with Professor Meta Morsing, the head of the Prime Secretariat, and then followed by my good friend, Professor Morris Mtombeni, a member of the Prime Global Chapter Council and Dean of the Gordon Institute of Business Science, Gibbs. In addition to a strong lineup of distinguished speakers from across the continent representing several of the founding committee members of Prime Chapter Africa, and delighted to also be joined by a student, Rakeli, from Strathmore University in Kenya, as a Prime Global student. The session, as you know, will be moderated by Sherwood, who has been serving as the vice chair of the Prime Africa Chapter Founding Committee over the past year. But first, let me give you a very, very quick introduction about AUC School of Business. So the university, as we call it AUC, the American University in Cairo, has been around since 1919. So we're into our 103rd year. The school itself, by the way, we started our programs in 1947. So this year is a very special year for us. It's marking our 75th year serving the higher education market in Egypt, but also in the regions we serve, which is basically the Middle East and Africa. Very interestingly, in 2009, we've actually restructured the school around 3 themes. The first is entrepreneurship, the second is responsible business, and the third is economic development. And these 3 elements have been our sort of direction, the strategic directions and priorities over the past decade and more. Before that, we used to address those issues, but not as explicitly as we did starting 2009. So obviously you can imagine that our teaching directions, research endeavors, but also services we offer for our community on campus, but also to the community at large, including projects, initiative, executive education, all fall within those 3 elements. For the interest of today's roundtable, we're focusing more on responsible business, and our role has been extremely simple. easier said than done for sure, but what we try to do is always advocacy, working with the private sector, with the government, with the civil society as our partner in the ecosystem to try to instill the concepts of being responsible, being principled in the graduates that go through our system year in, year out. Needless to say, integrating into our research, into our teaching, into our activities, the elements and the challenges we face as Egypt, but also as a continent. And in many ways, the whole world faces when it comes to social aspects, economic aspects, and environmental aspects. You even look at our vision and mission as a school, and it focuses on one thing. How can we develop the future business leaders and entrepreneurs who are successful yet responsible to try to maximize the impact on our society? Over the last several decades, I should say, we have always been pushing for, as a school and as a university at large, for the elements of inclusion, of equity, of diversity. And there are several examples I can share. I'm going to just highlight on a few, just to leave the floor for my colleagues to give their remarks. Needless to say, over the past 10 years, we've been mapping our activities to try to see how are we addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals? How does it feature in the teachings we give to our students? I'll give you an example that we offer through our academic program, but also through our sort of community development programs, is the work that has been done by a very dear colleague of mine, Dr. Ali Amni, whom we will be hearing, or he actually with us today, and we will be hearing from him later on. He's the director of the Gerhart Center for Philanthropy, Civic Engagement, and Responsible Business. This is a center that was established back in 2006. So you can tell we've started thinking of those issues back since 2006 in a more structured way. They existed from before, but I should say in a more structured way, in a more impactful way ever since. We look at this as the developmental arm of the school, addressing a whole lot of issues that should be integrated and be part of our offerings. That is manifested itself in research, capacity building, and when I mean capacity building, not just for our students, but actually for the community at large. Community development programs, internships, fellowships, competitions, sometimes boot camps, workshops. So we've had also a long history with PRIME. We're not starting it today for sure. And actually that dates back to, again, some meetings, discussions, alignment on certain issues until we actually hosted in October 2011. I believe it was the 2nd and the 3rd of October, if my memory serves me well, of 2011, when the school hosted the first PRIME MENA Regional Forum. And guess what? The title was Entrepreneurship, Sustainability, and Transparency, Promoting Responsible Management in a Changing Region. And if you can go back in time, October 2011 was just a year where a lot happened in this region, at least in the MENA region, which was the focus of the forum. And it was extremely well attended and kickstarted our sort of collaboration with PRIME, as I said, through the Gerhart Center. We continue to engage, excuse me, in different constituencies, and we position ourselves as a platform, as the educational partner, platform that links the business sector with our community at large. I strongly believe that business schools across Africa have a lot to offer, but they cannot do that alone. They need to work with the private sector hand in hand, but also with other constituents in the community. So the Gerhart Center sort of took the lead on that, but we also have a number of activities. I'm going to go through them very quickly, including, for example, the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. It has been offering since 2010 programs on women empowerment, promoting the notion of entrepreneurship, of trying to change the lives and livelihoods of the community at large. And guess what? In terms of size of a school, we have around 1,000 degree students, but through that center, we've actually trained over 70,000 over the last 12 years. So that tells you the magnitude of the center. Another center that actually focuses on research and try to reduce poverty and improve the lives and livelihood through informed policy making, which is the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, the JPAL. We started it off covering Egypt in 2018, and then we moved to cover the entire MENA region in 2020. I don't want to go on and share other stuff. That gives you an idea, but also the scope of the school and where we're heading. Obviously, this year, later on, from the 8th to the 11th of March, Egypt is hosting COP27, addressing, in my view, not just climate change, but climate change and all the repercussions of climate change. And that relates to the role that should be played, obviously, by governments as an enabling platform, but also the private sector. And I think business schools and higher education institutions also should play a role, again, advocacy, discussing those issues, spreading the awareness and the knowledge of what are the repercussions, the challenges, and the opportunities, because I also believe that we can, working together, we can actually turn around these challenges into opportunities. And needless to say, our role as a business school and higher education institutions, we inform, we train the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs to actually make a difference. So I think we have a lot to discuss. Again, delighted to have you all. And indeed, I repeat, I look forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully in the 4th edition next year. And I'll turn it over back to you, Sherwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dean Kamel. And again, so much activity is going on, which I'm sure is echoed in multiple schools that have also been Prime members for many years. So Meta, please, I'm happy to welcome you here and for your welcoming remarks. I'm sure you're excited as I am for this most awaited chapter.
Yes, thank you very much, Shavat Elvan Ibrahim, for this warm welcome. And we've certainly been waiting. I think it's fair to say, as you also allude to here, we've certainly been waiting. We've been building up over the past year to this very moment, to this very day. So my warmest congratulations to all of you for actually making this happen. And of course, a particular thank you to you, Shavat Elvan Ibrahim, and to you, Sami Bonsu, for taking the lead as co-chairing this brand new Prime Chapter Africa. As you will all know, we stand on a UN mandate from 2007 with a particular task mandated then by the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to transform management education and to have a particular focus on responsible management education. And that is indeed what the Prime community has done over the past 15 years. So you could say we also have a kind of an anniversary, like the American University of Cairo has with your 75 years anniversary this year. In Prime, we are celebrating the 15 years anniversary this year. So we are today a global movement of more than 800 business schools, universities around the world. We are organized in, and I'm proud to say of today, officially 17 chapters, and Prime Chapter Africa being the latest newcomer to the team. And we have also 9 working groups organized on themes like sustainable finance, business and human rights, anti-poverty, etc., where scholars from around the world will gather on research and education, sharing information, sharing ideas on these topical matters related to responsible management, education, and also, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals. We also have 37 champion schools right now in the current cycle, working on developing an SDG blueprint for sharing, exchanging ideas, and how do we teach this? How do we actually enter into the classroom and engaging our young students, the future leaders, on this very agenda? And sometimes I sort of think that it's not the students that are the challenge, it's perhaps ourselves as educators, that we need really to be on our toes because our students are challenging us. They want to know more about what responsible management means, depending on, of course, where you are working in the world. I also will congratulate the Prime Chapter Africa for already having developed a very impressive, very ambitious agenda for the next year. And I think it's fair to say for the next years to come, because there's a lot of activities and a lot of ideas of what you will actually try to achieve together as the huge continent you are, and how you want to grow that particular chapter. And I'm delighted to say that you've already had the visit of the CEO of the United Nations Global Compact visiting you at Stratford where Mumbi Bachira, part of the Prime Chapter Africa Steering Committee, and also here today, of course, was welcoming Sanda Odhiambo as she visited Kenya. And that was, of course, wonderful to have Prime Chapter Africa on that panel discussing leadership education into the future. And that is, of course, part of the UN Global Compact's new Africa strategy that is very much led by Sanda herself and her team in the UN Global Compact office. So she will visit it. This was her first, you could say, official visit with regards to the Global Compact Africa strategy, but it will not be the least. So we already are developing plans for her next visit that I've been discussing with you, Gerhart, and how we could make that happen also for other schools in Africa. I would like to say that we are on, as Prime, we are on a big journey, and definitely will the issues that Sherif Kamel mentioned about entrepreneurship and about responsibility is indeed what we are standing for and what we are working with. And let me just conclude by mentioning three S's, 3 times S, that I think are particularly important for us as a Prime community to look upon into the future. And that has to do with society, it has to do with success, it has to do with skills. So the first is the society. I think it is important that we think about in our educational experiences, in our educational practices, how we put society at the center of the stakeholder model. Right now, in much of our teaching, we have the corporation at the center of the stakeholder model. What would happen if we put society there? If we actually create the kind of mindset for our students that it is actually society we are there to serve as leaders and also, of course, as educators. I think that will challenge a lot of our curriculum. The second has to do with success. I think we need to rethink what success looks like as a leader and as a business. If I look upon a lot of the strategy textbooks I have on my personal bookshelf, a lot of that language is what some of our colleagues has called almost a warfare language. It is about conquer, it's about attack, it's about win over the others, it's about battle. What if we change that language into a language of co-creation, of partnering, of doing this together? That creates a completely different mindset about what it is we want our students to think, the way we want them to develop the world for us. The third has to do with skill sets, and that is sort of our challenge as educators in the classroom. How do we develop those skill sets where students will be able to create new solutions to problems where we don't have predefined solutions already, the so-called wicked problems? How do we create a skill set where students will be able to not only be a very, very smart financial analyst, but also be able to draw upon other skills from other disciplines in order to address the problems where it is, for example, about how do we, as investors and as financial professionals, also think about green investments, think about how our investments can improve human rights, and so on and so forth. So these are the 3 S's, the society, the success, and the skills. And I think this is very much ingrained in what Prime is about and the challenge that we have ahead of us. So on that note, I wish you a successful and inspirational launch today. I'm super happy to be here. I'm proud of what you have done already, and I look much forward to following the progress of Prime Chapter Africa to the years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maite. Thank you very much. And again, we're very lucky to have Professor Morris Mtombeni here with us from Gibbs. Morris, you're on the board of the Prime Global Chapters Council. Maybe you can give us some light about how the chapters work, how they bring back their knowledge back to Prime, and how this has been, I've learned a lot over the past year just by attending among these. So please.
Thank you, Gerhart. Thank you, Mette, for those wonderful opening remarks. And thanks, Sharif, for welcoming us onto your platform and inviting us to participate in your celebrations on the one hand, but also in helping on your 75th birthday to launch the Africa chapter. And as Gerhart said, I'm one of 4 Global Chapter Council members. And I think I stand corrected, Mette can correct me, that when Prime established the Chapter Council, the idea was to have as broad representation around diversity, inclusion, and equity. So you will find there is a Chapter Council member from Africa, and that is me. There's a Chapter Council member from South America. There's a Chapter Council member from the Middle East, and there's a Chapter Council member from the UK. And that doesn't suggest that we've covered the whole world, but I think as a start, it is a more inclusive community than I think historically when institutions are built. Those of us from the Global South always complain that we come late to the party and have to catch up with an agenda that has been established by those in the Global North. So I want to commend Mette and team for having this mindset from day one to say we need to establish a support community, a support body for that is inclusive from day one. Mette spoke about the 3 S's. Allow me to stay with the number 3, but choose an earlier letter, the 3 C's. And the first C that I want to talk about is the idea of connecting. And so in my view, my words, one of the functions of the Chapter Council is to connect all the now 17 chapters together in a way that encourages a more inclusive way about thinking about knowledge, about thinking about sustainability, about thinking about the challenges that face humanity, with an understanding about the role of higher education institutions, business schools, and universities in being a force for good in that space. And this is important that we start with this letter C of connection in a time when the world is disconnecting, at a time when a world was disconnecting as a consequences of the pandemic, the COVID virus, at a time when the world was disconnecting because we weren't really finding each other properly around the environment. And now we're not finding each other properly around our safety and security and wars. And of course, whilst we all agree that the war in Ukraine, I hope we agree, let me say, whilst I believe the war in Ukraine is completely unacceptable, there is no justification for the kind of horrors that are being visited on the people of Ukraine. But speaking as somebody who is not like them, does not have blonde hair and blue eyes, I do get offended when the world responds in the way it has positively to the crises in Ukraine, but did not apply the same kind of logic to many other conflicts, whether it's continuously as we have here on our continent in Africa or in Syria and other parts of the Middle East. And so I think schools like us, business schools, universities that are part of this chapter have an important role to play in saying we can say no to tyranny, but not just one type of tyranny, all type of tyranny, and we need to connect together in pushing back on those tyrannies. In fact, yesterday I was at a conversation, I think it's in where one of the academics said we should be less about promoting and more about attracting. What that means is that instead of promoting the work of Prime and promoting the work of Prime Chapter, we should be looking to attract more people into our community. And this then brings me to the second C, the C of collaboration. There are many business schools on the continent, but very few are members of Prime. And so our strategy should be to attract those that feel aligned to the principles of Prime and make them part of the tent and broaden their appeal, broaden the tent, so through things like collaboration. Business schools, if you wish, have been built on this notion of competition. I believe in a world that should be focused on a just transition, in a world that should be focused on a more inclusive society, we should really think long and hard about this word competition and consider replacing it with a word called collaboration. So, for example, when you look at our school, for example, we work very well with many schools on the continent, and we want to collaborate more. We want to collaborate more in terms of student exchanges. We want to collaborate more in terms of faculty exchanges. And I think all schools on the continent, instead of seeing each other as competitors, we should be seeing each other as collaborators, because the challenge on the continent is much greater than any single institution can meet. We don't have enough business school graduates to meet the challenges that are facing our continent. And therefore, I believe the agenda of every business school dean, every business school leader, every business school academic should be, how do I drive collaboration, even at this time when things are tough and resources are few? And the work of the Global Chapter Council is entirely to do that. We volunteer our time to attend chapter council meetings, to attend meetings with the chairs, and also to give input at peer evaluations that take place, the latest having taken place between end of January and February. And of course, the steering committee and the SEMI presented at that peer evaluation, not so much for evaluation, but to kind of give the peers an indication of where Chapter Council Africa was in its development. And of course, we are also available in a collaborative sense to come in on an ad hoc basis, not only through those formal meetings, to come and listen and support. And I'm glad to see Sharif is here. So Sharif, people like you and I and others need to play a role of making sure that the deans support the work of Prime Chapter Africa, because what I've learned and the Chapter Council, particularly in those, the difference between successful chapters and less successful chapters is that the deans are involved, the deans are supportive, they provide resources, and I think we need to encourage like-minded deans to be very supportive of the work of this particular chapter. And the final C is around curation. The work that we do in many business schools is about education, and it's typically around information-based. And I use that word on purpose because I think we need to think about a business school of the future, an African business school of the future, not being about information, but being about knowledge and insight. And that would then mean that I would expect that Prime Chapter Africa does a lot of work in bringing practitioners and academics together to have a conversation around how do we move from being an information-based society as business schools to being a knowledge and an insight-based society. And that would require collaboration around how we curate the work that we do in the business schools so that our graduates exit our business school as value-adding, value-creating, value-giving members of society from day one. And I think there's a lot of work that you can do, Gerhart and team, around this curation work. And of course, those of us that are in the Chapter Council do a lot of work in seeing the best practices in other spaces, and we're welcome to come into your world and share some of those best practices. I'm very privileged to be part of the launch of this chapter. And I look forward to working alongside you and supporting, especially given that I'm a member of this chapter, as opposed to just a visitor on the outside. So not only will I operate as a Chapter Council member, but I'll also operate as an ordinary member of this particular chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Thank you. We do wear, all of us wear different hats, and I think this is what makes this whole connection, collaboration work, is because we're there at this moment and there at the other. But we have a few minutes for questions, and I do want to give something practical to the audience just from the keynote speakers. In terms of the value Prime offers to the continent, I mean, it's good to reach out. It's good to have multiple examples, like Dean Campbell mentioned, about what happens on the ground. Meta explained a very nice approach that we can all use as the guideline for how we move on, and it's very inspiring. But again, Dean Campbell, what would you tell business schools or deans of business schools who are listening to us today who are not part of the Prime network? And how did Prime add to the AUC's identity, and how has it worked for us?
Well, thank you. And I'm going to build on what Mette and Morris said. Business schools are part of an ecosystem. And unless those bridges are built with the other constituencies, and business schools show how that would impact the community, then we're not really, not even scratching the surface. I truly believe that what can happen through the offerings of business schools, and I agree completely with Morris, we have a big continent with so many opportunities that remain untapped. And it needs the involvement, top down and bottom up, starting from the dean all the way down, with the faculty, with the directions, that to show how can business schools remain, in my view, relevant. Unless they are relevant to impact their own communities, then where is the effort going? How can they impact the society? And I love what Mette said, if we put society at the core. Well, that's basically what business schools are all about. I understand that historically, the focus has been on the shareholders' interests. Yes. But again, the shareholders' interest today is a flourishing, prosper community. So unless these two things are not talking about the balance, but unless these issues are addressed, then business schools will not remain relevant. They would be not engaged with what's happening around the world. And we can see, and I gave the example of the climate change, you look at what climate change is doing on economies, on social aspects, on companies, on resources, on individuals, and that's life. So unless they clearly position themselves as one important element in a bigger jigsaw puzzle and demonstrate how this can be reflected in their graduates, in the content that they create and they share. And again, to Morris's point, it's not about sharing information. It's about sharing and developing value-added knowledge, learning from each other. And I think we all have something to contribute, but need to step up. And I know Morris and I, we've had conversation in different circles. I lend my hand to my colleagues across the continent. I've always said we have 54 countries across the African continent, and we need to have at least 54 business schools, a business school in each country that would drive the rest and support the rest, and not just promote, but also integrate the others in achieving the goals that we all look for, which is a better society for all and impacting lives and livelihoods. I hope I answered you.
No, you did, and we're really, puts pressure on the chapter, to really deliver.
No pressure at all. No pressure.
No pressure at all.
But by the way, it's not about the chapter. And again, I think Morris's point is spot on. It's about us all engaging and getting involved. It's not a one-man show. It's an ecosystem that has to work together in tandem.
Thank you. And very, very, very adequately said. And I mean, I'm mindful of the time because I do want to transition to the more interactive roundtable setting where I welcome my co-members. But before we move on, Meta, any closing remarks to give us that needed inspiration to keep going for, I mean, we meet you all the time. Meta is one of the most available, seriously, heads I've ever seen. I'm sure she has this with everyone and every chapter. Morris can venture that. And But definitely just before we move into the roundtable session, which should begin any moment now, the interactive one. Please.
Thank you so much, Shavette. Well, I can just say that I had the huge privilege of actually in person visiting you, Shavette, last week, only in Cairo, and also had the wonderful, impressive tour around the American University of Cairo's Sustainable Role Model campus. That was fabulous. I also had the privilege of being invited as a keynote speaker for a group of 250 Egyptian business executives talking about research in partnerships. And I have to say, I was impressed. We had in the room 6 ministers. There are 19 ministers in Egypt. 6 of them were present in the room, 5 of those 6 female, by the way, and they were signing a CSR commitment for partnerships. How often do you meet 6 ministers in one room signing across ministers signing an agreement on CSR partnership? I think there is a lot, from the world, part of the world I come from, the so-called global north. I think there's a lot that the global north can learn from the global south. So please engage in that debate with me. Thank you.
No, we will, and we have actually part of our next plans for next year to have a lot of collaboration among North and South chapters, as you would call it. And yes, thank you very much. I'm sure, again, a lot of stuff is happening across the region in Africa. We just have to, maybe as a role as Prime Chapter Africa, bring it to the light more, show these initiatives, curate, I love that word, Morris, where we actually can pick and showcase what's happening to keep the positive attitude. Kamel, you want to add something? You mentioned your...
Just very quickly, we don't want to take too much more time from our distinguished speakers, but to Meta's point, and again, this is, we will have opportunities to see how we can collaborate at business schools, but just to let you know, I mean, must have been 8 years ago when the school decided to not take charge, but take the lead in what we called Women on Board Observatory, which is an initiative to try to improve the gender balance in corporate boards in Egypt. So we started that journey, as I said, 2014, we started coming up with the annual report in 2017. The report for 2021 is, I think, out in a week or so. We've seen improvement because there has been, over the years, sort of massive awareness campaign, training, certification process, developing a database for women ready to be on corporate boards. And we've seen the numbers coming up, and we've seen an unbelievable passion and enthusiasm by many private sector companies to bring in more diversity into their corporate boards, and that falls directly to one of the elements that at least we've been focusing on for the past maybe 15 years, which is women empowerment, and we've learned a lot from that. And I'm obviously ready and happy to share the entire experience with my colleagues across the continent.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I think it's something food for thought for this chapter, in particular, my colleagues who I'm going to meet in a moment, is that the role of, Sharif mentioned the ecosystem, and the role of policy and national policies in Africa, I think, should be approached with a unique way. They do look for higher education institutions to support them with research, with policy briefs, with ideas that would guide them along this way. And even a COP27, I think there's a national approach for this one, especially that Egypt is hosting it in November. So again, too much exciting stuff to talk about. I hope everyone is inspired as I am. I'm going to kindly ask my lovely esteemed speakers right now to turn off their cameras, and welcome to transition into the more interactive, informative, hopefully also. We have much detail about what needs to be done if you want to be part of Prime Chapter Africa. I'd like to welcome, very happy to see friendly faces here. I've worked with these lovely colleagues over the past year. We have a lot of detail to share. I remind you, it's an interactive session, so do please enter your questions, make sure to include them, and I'll make sure to bring them to the panel. Without further ado, again, let me please introduce Professor Sami Bonsou, who was the chair for the founding committee over the past year. And also recently, while we were there, he was appointed rector for Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, GIMPA, which made him again very busy, but we're happy to have him here to give us a brief overview of what the provisional committee did over the past year. Tammy, on to you.
Thank you very much, Gerhart. Good afternoon, morning, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are, I suppose. This is a great day for Prime Africa. I think that in the past year or so, you know, the wonderful ladies I've had to work with, we've agreed, we've disagreed, we've discussed, we have noted all kinds of things, but in the end, I think that we ended up in agreement. And then we obviously proposed some things. Part of our role, our mandate, in fact, we were set up to be a temporary committee to organize thoughts, supplies information, and then pull them together to create guiding principles for the sustenance of the African chapter of Prime. And that is precisely what we set out to do. So one of the things, and if you go to the website, a lot of these details are available there on our website, and also you can get a link to some of them from the Prime website. But our goal, part of our goal really was to develop a governance structure, lay out a scheme by which Prime going forward is going to be operating with. So we know that we are setting up not for just today, but for the future as well. So the guiding principles that are laid out in the governance structure is a long document, and time will not permit me to go through each of them. But essentially, what we tried to do was to provide guidelines to help, you know, establish the chapter and hopefully entrench it into the African, let's call it, system. As humans, obviously, we are no different from many others around the world. But there are certain cultural and other peculiarities that we took into account in looking at this document. So in terms of its base, it is not significantly different from what you would find from other units. We were guided also by information that we received from the center, which is the head office in New York, and the group that has Metis group that provided us with a lot of moral and other support as we needed them. So we have a document for the governance structure. Part of what we also had to do was to start looking at relationships, and my colleagues here, each of us took on a specific responsibility. And I don't know if I should introduce each, or as each speaks, she, because I was privileged enough, let me stretch by saying that in Ghana, when you're sitting, you mention somebody's name and you get up like this, it's an indication of the ultimate level of respect. You know, it's above tipping your hat. So I'm standing, I'm getting up for these ladies and the wonderful job that they did, you know, in getting us to meet with chapter chairs of other chairs of other chapters, individuals within both the African and international systems with various types of experiences to share with us. I think when Mete was speaking, she talked about the interactions that the Kenyan group, Mombi and her team, had with various people visiting from the center again. So we have had a wonderful opportunity working together, listening to them. I like to think that, you know, my role was really one of a backbencher and being a cheerleader, more than trying to be the driver. I've been married long enough to know that you achieve a lot more when you are willing to give than to always seeking to take. And in this case, I think it worked extremely well. So we had engagements, And we talked about ways of, I think there were times when we were far ahead of our mandate, but every so often we would remember and pull ourselves back to say, listen, we have 1 year to work with. Let's work with that 1 year, and we'll look at going forward. As part of structure also, and in our annual report to Prime, we indicated opportunities for growth, for enhancing Prime's recognition and brand awareness on the continent. When Sharif Kamel was speaking, he talked about the fact that there are 54 countries on the continent, and perhaps we should have no less than 54 Prime members. I think Gerhart was a little stressed about that, but I would say I would even make it 108. I would double it, to just to add to Gerhart's stress. But I think that we can do it. Africa is ripe. Africa is ready. We've had the benefit of history, and we have the benefit of also, with modern technologies and others, to be able to see ahead. So history will tell us what mistakes that we should try to avoid, and then looking forward with all the benefits that we see now, how do we tap that? And so sustainability as a driver for economic development is essential. And so whoever the group is, or the going forward team, will have to look at, a strong sense of sustainable Africa, engaging the 108 countries, and having active engagement also, not just with the institutions of higher learning, but with the various stakeholders whose interest will be served just as much as the interest of the world will be served by our recognition of sustainable activities. We also have today this very, very special day, So we are launching the African chapter officially. That has been a major part of activities, the planning, especially in the last few months leading up to this event. Once again, the ladies have done an excellent job, and I'd like to say thank you very much to all of them. I'd also like to say thank you to AUC for allowing us or giving us a part of your 75th anniversary celebration to launch Prime Africa. Obviously, I believe that this is a testament to your deep-seated support for sustainability and the values that are espoused by Prime. So we thank you very much. We cannot ignore Prime itself for the support that the center, Mete, Sophie, have given to us over the last year. We also have to say congratulations, because I think Prime is maturing into a teenager, getting into the advanced teenage years. At 15, you are beginning to assert your independence and authority, and parents will have to listen. So as you slowly come of age, we know that you've come a long way already. But I also would hope that the values espoused by Prime will carry it well into its 75th year. But I think, and I hope, that by the time Prime is 75, in those 60 years ahead of us, Prime would have basically killed itself by being so well integrated into our societies that there will be no need for Prime. Everybody would be just Prime enough. The African chapter is just about a year old. In the past year, as I noted, we have talked, discussed, disagreed, but eventually we agreed. And here we have today the launch of this beautiful chapter. Africa is diverse. Africa is different. Africa is ready, but we are part of the world. However unique we are part of the global world, and collaboration, involvement with various activities around us and within us are necessary to facilitate a movement in this movement that I'd call it a movement to help us engage all of us on the continent within and between countries. So really, I guess in short, I'd like to say that I am privileged, very, very privileged to have worked with the steering committee and also to be part of this new direction that Prime saw in engaging Africa to a degree higher than it has always been, in terms of helping us develop a new way of thinking about management education on the basis of responsibility. We have a vast continent with tremendous opportunity, and I'd like to side with Mete's point about just imagine, and I'll invite us to just imagine changing, the cooperation in our business school principles and strategies into the society. So we put society in place of business or stakeholders, because in business, we always thought that your primary role is to maximize stakeholder benefit. Can we imagine that the only stakeholder we have in every business is society? So that if we are still maximizing stakeholder society, we are looking at the benefit that society gets from our activities. We'll be less conscious or less involved in certain things. We'll be more conscious of a variety of things that support us in various things that we do. So at the core of all of our activities, I imagine a blossoming Africa with equality, preservation, peace, prosperity, and above all, environmental sustainability as its core, as its center. And I hope that the work that we have begun as the steering committee of Prime, as they outlined what our activities were supposed to be, and I have mentioned some of them, I hope that it becomes a very strong and good foundation for all of us to build on. And I look forward to supporting a Prime Africa into my very, very old age. So once again, thank you very much, ladies. Thank you to everyone who has made this day possible. And may you all be blessed in immeasurable ways as we continue to work in the interest of our continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you for, again, your helpful, your insights and what happened over the past year, and your inspiration. So we're very happy to have everyone else in the room. There's going to be more details, more on the practical level, and what we expect. And as we go around the room, every member in the committee did their parts over the past year, and there will be a chance for you guys to see what happened. Allow me, being a member, again, I wear a couple of hats here. I'm being a moderator and the vice chair, to also for a few minutes wear my hat and as we go around, cover a very important part that Sami hinted towards, that I personally was involved in over the past year, which relates to strategic partnerships with existing entities. And also I want to reflect on the collaboration with the UN Global Compact local networks, as Meta had hinted about, this whole Africa strategy component that we want to really focus on for UN Global Compact. So we actually have two sections in our governance document, the one Sami mentioned, that explains explicitly how to move forward with these two initiatives. Let me begin first a little bit on the one with strategic partnerships. So it's only, it only makes sense, of course, to build on the work that's been done before. Africa sustainable development is not a new topic, right? We know, the three words actually can stick together as one. So that said, there's so much work done already, and there's so much still to be done, God knows. So we looked at, the first thing that came to mind, and we really had to hold our guns a lot in those meetings, is to reach out to the existing associations and entities that have been operating, serving the continent. I personally had the privilege to reach out to the leadership of, Association for African Business Schools, Africa Academy of Management, the Global Business School Network. And again, at every time I had those meetings, I would leave the room with a heart-warm feeling of openness, enthusiasm. Let's do it. What can we do? There's usually too much ideas and things that needs to be done, and I can't wait to again, begin organizing things on the ground. The second part that is a really strategic priority for us, especially in this chapter, and we really think this is how we should move tomorrow if we begin, right, is to establish closer links with PRIME, UN Global Compact local networks in our different regions across the continent, all right? So, and again, and Sharif hinted to this, and I'm sure if, some of you might be as fortunate as I am to work in a business school where industry linkages are strong. So in other words, experiential, we talk about students being critical, looking for relevance in what we do. And nothing is, students are very skeptical when you introduce topics related to sustainable development, especially if it does not match the kind of textbook style that they get to read till now, at least based on, following up on what Meta was saying. So what we do is we try to really invite, industry into our classrooms, whether through speaker events or through projects where students apply what they learn. We send our students actually for months. We have a co-op program to the industry to spend some time before they graduate, come back to the classroom, bring it back. My dear colleague, Dr. Abdel Megid, tomorrow actually is running a session as part of the business forum just on this linkage between industry, academia, and students, and how it works. With also prime guest speakers there also, Dima Jamali from the board. So I'm really excited about that one. But I do have to say, and again, this has to do with the leadership in UN Global Compact. It was a monument, last year, I think, was a monumental year where Ms. Sanda Ojabio launched this initiative on Uniting Business Africa. And there is a clear developed strategy for how businesses in the UN Global Compact network should approach SDGs. And I think, when you have that kind of clarity, it can help. Again, you can see results sooner than if everyone has those incremental efforts. So again, we here at PRIME Chapter Africa will be really happy to support the UN Global Compact local networks and businesses that belong to these networks in driving ambition and action on their SDGs. We have many ideas on how to engage in joint activities with students, promote dialogue between academia, business leaders, private sector, public sector, like Meta and Sharif pointed out, and nonprofit sectors, which have a huge role in civil society. I don't think we can get anything done unless we reach out to the civil society of these regions. So we can't wait to begin. And this is actually a very nice cue for my dear colleague here, who again, Dr. Mumbi Washira. She was the head of member engagement activities, assigned that role, but since we held back our guns on that one a little bit to expand to the 108 schools we have to get, we said, let's just focus on the launch. And again, Mumbi was role here, along with Jill Bogie, was instrumental in having today happen. But again, in that role, she has a lot of great ideas that she's going to share with us, that she want to put forth for the incoming steering committee. That work we did, ideas we thought about. So Mumbi, without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Shawat, and again, good greetings everybody joining us from all over the world. I'm so happy and honored to be here with you today. So as my colleagues have mentioned, we had several discussions about what will be useful for people who want to join PRIME and those who have been engaging with PRIME in Africa across different countries, across different universities. So definitely the first logical activity we thought of is what we call a SIP reporting workshop. So for those who may not be familiar with what a SIP report is, SIP, that's sharing information on progress report. Now, once you do sign on to PRIME, you are required to provide a biannual report that describes the ways in which you are implementing PRIME principles. Okay, so everything that the speakers at the beginning mentioned, how are you embedding education for sustainable development across your university, across your business school? When you think about partnerships, policy advisory that align with the sustainable development agenda, how are you doing in each of these fronts? And you find, as is the case, because I have an accounting background, there's always an issue when it comes to preparing reports. So this will be the first idea that we think and we hope that the steering committee will take forward. I was talking to different people and doing a bit of research on, okay, what's actually the benefit of SIP reporting apart from the obvious? And the first thing is that it helps give you, even an understanding of what your institution is doing. My experience within mine is that sometimes we don't know what the right hand is doing or what the left hand is doing. And it just gives you that baseline to understand, oh, these are all the activities, these are all the ways in which we're actually embedding prime principles. Another thing is that it helps, apart from the reputation, and really giving visibility, there are other benefits, because as Shawat is saying, if we're talking about partnerships with global compact networks, and we're talking about partnerships with a body like the GBSN and others, we need to have a clear understanding of what it is we're doing and how they plug in and how we plug in into what they're doing. And that's where the reporting comes in. I'd like to give a shout out, to some of our colleagues here who have very good reports. One of them is Lagos Business School. I see you guys in the attendees list, Teresa or Reva from the Sustainability Center. And for those who are interested, you can get a link to their report on our resources page on Prime Chapter's website for Africa. Look at it because it's quite detailed in terms of what does purpose mean for Lagos Business School? What are the values that are, they're embedding across their activities? What's the research they're undertaking? What are their programs? What are their methods? And I felt quite challenged reading it. So I think it'll really help those of us here who perhaps are really just beginning on that sustainability journey with Prime to understand what best practices are for our schools. The other way in which we think will be very helpful in terms of engagement speaks very closely to what Professor Mtombeni said, which is really around a Deans and Directors Forum that supports the work of the steering committee for the chapter. Because it's true, when you're thinking about, all these range of activities and decisions that need to be made, the chapters that are successful, as has been indicated, are the ones that have support from top leadership. Yes, you need bottom-up approaches. The faculty, in fact, my feeling is that most chapters begin with a bottom-up. It's faculty that maybe are interested and then they drive it forward. But then we need leadership. We need our deans, we need our directors to support us in terms of advocacy, in terms of helping us to build those collaborations and partnerships, in terms of even giving the strategic direction. Some of the things that I've had today from Professor Sherif and Professor Mtombeni have really challenged me. And I feel, this is coming because of the wealth of experience they have. So we do see that Deans and Directors Forum being instrumental for the chapter for Africa. And we think even, having events, sessions, workshops that incorporate the insights from the Deans is going to be very useful and strategic for the growth of the chapter. The other way we think of, engaging with people is through regional hubs. So as was mentioned earlier, when we were starting, we were saying, okay, how do we start? So there was a brilliant idea from the members in the committee, which was, why don't we actually ask established chapters how they set up their chapters and what they're doing now? So we then reached out to them, North America, the DAC chapter, Latin America and the Caribbean. And these guys shared their ideas around the ways in which they had constituted themselves and the activities that they had for the year and more or less what their strategy was moving forward. And we got this idea of regional hubs, mostly from Gustavo Loyola, who is leading the Prime chapter for Latin America and the Caribbean. Because as we all know, Africa is vast. We are so diverse in terms of not only language, culture, there's a whole, set of very unique aspects that characterize different regions. And we do think that in future, we may find that there may be regional hubs developing, perhaps, East Africa, where I'm from. I'm seeing even some of my colleagues here from Dar es Salaam, where we do other things with them. Thanks for coming. And, others, maybe Makerere in Kampala, where we feel, there's some workshops, some events which are very specific to our countries. And we think it would be useful to have, a formalized hub where we have a committee that steers the activities, but now based on the hub itself. So we have put that provision in the governance document. And there are other ways in which we can engage, even through specific projects, not just a regional hub, but even having a project hub where we are collaborating for a specific activity or set of activities. So this is our view in some of the ways we think we can grow the chapter, we can spread the word. Of course, one of the most important ones and crucial for our success is the student-led activities. And I'm very happy that my student, friend, colleague, Raquel Ikuria is here because she can speak to that with more authority than I can. But as I was preparing for this, I looked at some of the partners here. I know GBSN is here on the call. There is a very interesting business concept challenge, which I have actually, signed to be part of. And, it's just, having students think about how can they build businesses that solve social challenges or embed shared value, for example. Global Compact Local Networks Kenya has, an SDG Innovators Challenge for future business leaders. So these are just some ideas, on ways in which the chapter can engage with students. But I know I can talk about this for ages, Shawat, and I know we have a variety of people to speak, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mumbi. Again, we have, that's the brief list. We have a longer list if you're interested, but we have with many execution ideas. And again, as Sami said, we have to hold back our guns a bit before we got too excited about what can be done in Africa. Regional hubs, again, I do want to echo that it's a very nice way to do even face-to-face connections. Meta had just after a visit last week that, we did, well, this is, I have to say, the online version is very inclusive and it's nice to have every now and then, face-to-face events that are hosted by universities like what Prima had began, and the concept as it began was something that we're looking forward to push forward. So, and again, all right, another part that was also very unique to the continent while we were drafting the governance document had to do with the active role that we can expect from the Africa diaspora. We all know that there's so much good minds out there doing already a lot for the continent, but not physically inside. So we actually decided to have a clause in our governance to guide this relationship. And I'd like to invite my dear colleague here, Professor Judy Muduri from Nottingham University Business School, a prime signatory school in the UK, joining us here to talk about that part, please.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity. I'm delighted to join you this morning, and you will excuse me, I'm nursing a horrible cold. So I was listening earlier on to the earlier presenters, and I was really nodding pretty hard and agreeing with them. And so when Professor Dombeni articulated extremely well, the various C's, the question of connecting, rang a bell with me because my role this morning is really to speak around the notion of connecting with the diaspora as critical to expand those numbers that Sami mentioned, and I would even add, going beyond 108 to even think of 208. So the diaspora as a concept, as we know, can mean many different things to different people. And so for us, the African Union, defines the African diaspora as those people of African origin who are living outside the continent, but who are willing, and I think that's a big point for me, who are willing to contribute to the development of the continent and building of the African Union more generally. And the African diaspora, we all know, has been recognized as the 6th region by the AU. And if you happen to be from Kenya like I do, the Kenyan diaspora is actually recognized as Kenya's 48th country. And just like Kenya, many other African countries have recognized their diaspora as a critical constituent. And so really we must applaud Prime Chapter Africa for doing the right thing to recognize this important constituent in its governance structure. As we all know, we are a diverse group of people from different, living in different continents, but we represent a huge reservoir of human, social, knowledge, financial capital, all sorts of capitals you can add to that list. And Prime Chapter Africa would really wish to harness these different capital so as to advance responsible management education and more generally the sustainable development in Africa. And to really build a great chapter that provides a learning platform for us all. And when I say this, I don't see learning as a one-way traffic. I must add that the diaspora can learn immensely too, especially in these times when we must explore and expand a more decolonial future. We can also amplify the stories and the voices of Africa to the world. We have a responsibility to do that. And just to, echo what my colleagues earlier on have said, there are many African intellectuals working in the field of sustainability, ethics, social responsibility, governance, ethical leadership. The list is long. We may not be physically located in Africa, but many of us conduct, great interdisciplinary research in and about Africa, and collaboration ought to be our mantra. The diaspora can collaborate with our contemporaries working in institutions based in Africa to advance responsible management education, and we can do this through various mechanisms, through conducting relevant research, engaging in knowledge creation and knowledge transfer initiatives. Someone earlier on talked of student and staff exchanges. We can design innovative, impact-oriented and capacity building initiatives, either directly with other Prime members, school members, or Prime Africa chapter, as an institution. But we also play a critical role in building bridges between the continent and other regions of the world. So many of us work in schools that are Prime members or Prime champions. This group of people really have first-hand experiences of how Prime principles have been embedded in their own schools. Whether it is through research, teaching, operations, student engagement, and we can draw from these experiences to learn together. So I see the diasporas being connectors. They can be mentors. They can offer that critical support systems to colleagues in African business schools who might either not have the capacity to design or even implement a sustainability strategy for their own schools. So we are proud, just to remind you all of our African roots. We want to be part of the African Renaissance. We want to give back to the continent that birthed us. We are able to share information, research, capacity building opportunities that can benefit our colleagues in African universities. And through innovation, entrepreneurship, resource mobilization, we can actually contribute to develop new solutions and ideas that can transform education for sustainable development. And just to, in conclusion, I would say that many of us also have strong networks with Prime schools in Africa, or would be Prime schools in Africa that we can all tap into. Remember, many of us completed either our early education or our first degrees back in the continent. We are alumnus of many business schools in Africa. And so we can use we can be used as influencers, as door openers, as potential ambassadors. And our challenge is for Prime Chapter to see us as allies, in helping to implement the African strategies, including expanding and, rolling out the membership strategy to help recruit our alma mater schools into the Prime family. So we are willing to engage, but I also must put, the reality that we sometimes face in the diaspora, which includes institutional barriers that limit our engagement with institutions back home. So let's not forget that reality. And even if you hear, stories of how we as diasporians have contributed to the brain drain, we must really challenge this tired old narrative by demonstrating that we are key contributors to advancing responsible management education. It's about brain gain. And so the founding committee has done a great job to include us, and we must help, and ensure that we as Prime Africa chapter really benefit from these great constituents, where we continue to proactively facilitate the diaspora contribution, and the future leadership must be willing to continue strengthening structures, creating enabling environment, strengthening the systems that have already been founded so that we can facilitate meaningful and productive engagement and partnership with the diasporians. So without further, with my last remark, I would say a sustainable Africa is our collective business, and we are in this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. That was, I really liked, of course, the idea, the inspiration, and all the things you mentioned, but especially the very practical approach where, you would link to the universities that you probably got educated here before you traveled, and make sure that at least they are part of the larger network that we're trying to grow. Again, research, in research, especially related to the African Academy of Management, there is a lot of more diaspora efforts than actually, I would say, local African in that community. So it shows again how the brain drain is taking place, and again, brain gain is the way to go. We might want to even lead a role about the research component with you guys on that, in addition to your efforts, of course, as steering committee members that would attract your older institutions. Thank you, very interesting. Mumbi had mentioned student engagement and Prime Global Student Initiative by Prime. It's a new initiative for Kelly. Please let us know a little bit about how it began, how it came about, what you did, and seriously what you expect of us in the coming few years.
Thank you so much. My name is Raquel Ikuria, and I am the Regional Lead Africa for Prime Global Students, as well as co-lead for the Careers Program Task Force. And Prime Global Students, I think the best word to summarize would be empowerment and connection. Because even in our purpose statement, we would say that the aim of Prime Global Students is to empower students all across the continent by creating a platform where they're able to connect, empower, and inspire one another. And I think throughout the entire talk, there has been a lot of talk about connection. And actually, one of our 3 pillars are awareness, collective action, and advocacy. And what we aim to do is empower student initiatives, student-led businesses, student organizations that deal with responsible management and sustainable development. And how Prime began, I think it began definitely with Prime itself. How Prime Global Students began with Prime itself. And the first step was locating regional leaders. And this was done through Paulo Speroni, who is our project lead and again, fearless leader. And after recruitment of the regional leads, and there's a representative from each continent as well, we moved on to the research phase. And the thing about Prime Global Students is it's an initiative for students by students. And each and every step of the way, there was student engagement, inputs from the students. Even the projects that I will mention a bit further on have been chosen specifically by the students. And we began with a research phase where we started by having students from all across the continent join us for casual convenings. They're focus groups, but we call them casual convenings, where we discussed the different needs that different student organizations within universities face. And we brought together all of those needs and every challenge that's facing the students, and we compiled them into one list. And we moved on to the design phase, where we had a project brainstorming, we discussed our portfolio, we voted, we decided these are the values that Prime Global students would like to embody. And moving on from there, then we broke down the needs and what had been voted for by the students into specific task forces, which we have social media, the Measuring Impact Committee, the Careers Program, we have social media, we have Prime Global Students Talks, to mention but a few. And even within these task forces, it is the students themselves who are operating within it, the students who are coming up with what would like our key performance indicators, and the projects working within the projects themselves. So that is currently an overview of what we do as Prime Global students. And it's important, this connection, this empowerment, and having students all across the board, because it provides a platform for us to share ideas, and not just share ideas, but collaborate with one another, learn from one another, because you'll find that maybe in another business school on another continent, they've already implemented an idea that someone else or a different school and a student initiative is trying to do in a different area. So the students here, through the connection that they're able to get through Prime Global students, are able to collaborate, share ideas, share failures, and also connect them to different, of course, moving forward, because Prime Global students in itself is still a young initiative and it's growing, though rapidly, and we're very, very happy to have the students that are on board and the clubs that are on board. And so they're able to exchange ideas, they're able to collaborate in some cases, they're able to attend each other's initiatives. So that is very important when it comes to that. And it makes a change. An example is there's a Canadian youth group that was able to bring about a change in the curriculum from the students to integrate sustainable development and responsible management. And that way they have created a path where previously a path was not there before. So it would even make it easier for another student organization here in Africa to be able to do the same, because we've connected these two groups and we've also supported them, because their current infrastructures that we are building as students within Prime Global students to enable other students to have more inroads and, to have a wider reach, and even to open the mental experiences. And furthermore, there is also the global interaction and the skills and competencies that the students are obtaining, even as we work within Prime Global students.
Amazing stuff. And again, I do hope that us as a Prime chapter, I mean, all the institutions probably that are signatories for Prime already have active clubs, maybe not branded as Prime, but maybe I want to move, see ways that we can definitely bring in your, at least events, your activities, and then maybe even look at some kind of collaboration among them where, we don't have to do things, collaborate forces the same way we would do it with strategic partnerships or UN Global Compact. Again, something at the student level definitely, I think we need to put that in our strategy for the coming year. But thank you for shedding the light on this very exciting new initiative that I'm very happy you're already reaping benefits from, some real impact here. So thank you for that one. Again, Sami, I echo what you said, that we were always holding back on all these ideas. We had all these thoughts, and Sami was always very excited to talk about them. And we would have to, when fall came, said, we're going to just stop talking about anything student everything that everyone has said and just focus on the launch and the governance. And we're really excited about the future of this chapter. Kimi, Dr. Kimi Oguniemi here. I saw Mumbi talking about your wonderful SIP report. SIP report, again, is a word when you join the Prime community, you'll get to know very well. All right. So basically, it's that biannual report. But I do have to say, I took a look at the link on the Prime Chapter Africa website that openly shares. And I'd love to see, it's nice that I can even follow the structure you have. It's overwhelming. You're doing too much. So please share with us again a bit about how a Prime signatory school goes about drafting such, a comprehensive document.
Thank you very much, Shawat. Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. And I will also start by saying thank you to my colleagues on the committee. It's been a long year and everybody has been brilliant. And thank you for all the ideas shared so far, even on this call. So LBS has been a communicating member school of Prime for a very long time, since 2011 when we became signatory to the UN Principles for Responsible Management Education, which is Prime, and we remain committed to the principles. One of the reasons why it was such an attractive thing for us is that the principles resonated already with the missional imperative of the school. I think this is one of the things that have facilitated being able to try to get the SIP correct, because many of the things that we had to report on were things that were already taking place. And from what I'm hearing from the different schools represented here, it's probably a similar experience. And our mission in the school is to develop high potential professionals with a general management education that stresses professional ethics. So that emphasis on responsibility and sustainability has always been there. We also stress service to the community through the practice of management. So we try to make sure that throughout their career, their time in the school, students have this orientation towards serving in their places where they're working, because we're a graduate school. We're located separate from the undergrad campus. So practically everybody that walks through the door is an executive in one business or the other. So they have ample opportunity to try and practice those things. And we also try to see how we can do some mentoring post when they have left the school through the Alumni Association, and also through the opportunities they have for coaching in the alumni network, so that they continue trying to practice if they want, obviously. I mean, they have their freedom, but at least the opportunities are there to support them to live that dream of being an oasis of sanity in the country. Because it's not so easy to act responsibly sometimes in the face of the challenges in the business world. So yes, about this SIP, the SIP report, the way we go about it is that we have a unit that is in charge. And I think that has helped us a lot. So it's very clear who has the responsibility for it. So the drafting of the report is led by the Sustainability Center in the school. And therefore, there has been consistency over the years, because it's one of the major things that they're interested with. They drive Prime activities in the school, and they are the ones to do the report. And they collaborate with the various units in the school to gather the information, but they are the main drivers. We also have links to track the activities over the period. We report every 2 years, but if you start at the end of 2 years to start thinking, what have we done? It's really too much. So we try to track all along the period and to record and document the things that take place. So therefore we have a number of internal program reports, news, blog on the website, like what they call it, not bulletins, newsletters to the school from the centers that engage in trying to practice different aspects of our responsibility initiatives. So all those things are there, and therefore they act as repositories for the people in charge of drafting the SIP to collect the data when the moment comes, because the dates are there, the things have been reported in various ways already along the period. And that also makes the process more structured and more inclusive, because then you hear from all the different units in the school. And we're working on trying to cascade the learning to the whole school so that more and more colleagues engage with the whole idea of the PRIME initiative, and they understand the principles and how each unit contributes to having that impact from the entire school. We don't have PRIME specific activities actually, because of what I already said. That's prioritizing in our program. We try to link everything to the principles already, but we try to also encourage our MBA students to engage with PRIME activities, and that helps as well, because then they also report what they do to the MBA department whenever they do personal social responsibility projects or group social responsibility projects. They report to the MBA department. And one of the areas that we're still trying to improve on is getting faculty more involved, because then we'll also be able to capture more information about what they're doing with the students in line with PRIME. So that's basically how we do it.
Thank you, Kimmy. And again, I have to say, because I think in the content, Africa Sustainable Development or sustainability topics, CSR, has been talked about so many times. So you find yourself basically not just filling the PRIME report, but kind of accumulating all the work done in these areas and being able to fill those. So it doesn't become, reinventing the wheel, just maybe reporting it in a very informative way. And again, you did a wonderful job at Lagos School of Business. So thank you. We have enough time. All right, so about the questions, we've been inviting everyone to submit questions so far. All I'm getting is votes of, cheering up, good job, let's do this. So I'm very happy to see those. But if you still have any inquiries, I hope my colleague here, Dr. Jill Bogie from Gibbs, who has been acting as the chapter secretary and worked on drafting the governance document in collecting input from all the steering committee. She can maybe, Jill, shed some light about the highlights of this document, and also maybe a clear next step if someone is listening to us now. We're hoping to collect nominations in the near future, so please take us to where to go, what to do, and we'll have the links shared on the chat for everyone to go on. Jill?
Thank you so much, Gerhart. Thank you to all my colleagues on the founding committee, and to our guest Raquel, who is a colleague as well as in our student body, and also to everybody that's joining us today. And I've so enjoyed listening to everybody, and now I have to give you some of the details on the governance document, and we've covered all the highlights, so I have two things to mention to you. One was to provide you with some highlights, and secondly, to talk about the next steps. The highlights have really helped us to structure this conversation this morning, because way back about an hour ago, Sami introduced the governance document and said that we had used the guidelines that have been prepared by the Global Chapter Council and approved by the Prime Secretariat. And that was the basis, our starting point, and making sure we are aligned with the best practices that have been documented by the mature chapters, as well as what they have learned, so that we didn't start with a blank piece of paper. We were able to develop it, and what we've done is to personalize or customize it for the key priorities that we see as important on the African continent. And those have been the things that our agenda has focused on. So the first really that is, well, they're not in any particular order, but the diaspora has been very important to us, and also speaks to the fact that inclusiveness is not just including everybody on the continent, but actually those that can contribute to the development of the continent. And as Judy so elegantly put it, she positioned what contribution can be made, how there is support, enthusiasm, and encouragement, but most importantly, there is help. There is help with capacity building. It's one of the 3 C's. There's the connecting, but there's also the collaboration, and the capacity building goes with the curation and how we build best practices and help each other. So in doing that, we also wish to, in due course, but we don't want to run before we walk, but we do recognize that with the vast area and 54 countries, that while engaging as we are today as a continent, inviting our international colleagues serves a really important purpose. So does more localized engagement, and that we have been advised is something that we should have already got a structure that we can utilize, and these are the regional hubs. But we will develop the regional hubs in order to engage more with local fora, with local activities and events, by the schools and the people that are championing what is happening in the different regions. And those will really, we will respond at the Africa chapter level to those that have that enthusiasm and energy and want to move forward by providing a mandate and guidance and support to those regional efforts, and also make sure that they are aligned and that they are supportive, but also are drawing from the knowledge that we have, not only in Africa, but the greater Prime community and the support we have internationally. And we have a fabulous network internationally of people that are very excited about what we are doing today and are willing to help. So the other thing is already mentioned was the Deans and Directors Forum, which is something that was mentioned earlier, the importance of that convening power and the support. And so rather than talk about top down and bottom up, we really have this collective energy that comes, and that we need the help of all those in different positions with different expertise and different experiences. And the last was also part of what we have today, is to ensure that we are working together with and alongside our colleagues in the UN Global Compact local networks. We're part of the same overall UN initiative, and this is something that I experience in a very valuable way from the business school side, working with my colleagues at the Global Compact Network South Africa, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because they had a clash in terms of another event that is taking place on gender equality. So there's always lots happening. So that's actually the highlights. The second thing I would like to say, and I realize that our time is coming to a close, is what is happening next. The next steps are to nominate a new committee with a 3-year term, and the process for doing so has been is included in the governance document at paragraph 8.4. That I'm not going to share slides or anything and go into that detail, but the details are actually provided in the governance document, which is on the Prime website under the Africa chapter. And I think that Mumbi has actually shared the link a little bit earlier, and you will find that there are various documents there, including the governance document and some highlights. But the key is that in the next 2 weeks, we will be sending out invitations to all the communicating schools. A communicating school is one that is already a member and continues to actually report in terms of their sharing of progress. I would encourage all those schools that are not yet members or not yet communicating to actually engage with us over the next few years, so that when it comes to the next elections, that you actually can participate in this forum. But we encourage you to actually participate in the events that we will be organizing. But the call for nominations is for communicating schools. The call will go to the registered contacts with the Prime Secretariat as well as to deans. Please look out for that. If you are close to the activities of Prime or SDGs in your institution, please make sure that you encourage the nomination process and make sure it happens. There are 2 nominations. The first is for a member of the chapter steering committee, the CSC, and the second is the office, the key office holders. And so there is the one leads to the other, and there's 2 nominations. If you can be aware of that, we welcome nominations for both members, in addition to members also for the key office bearers. In order to be a key office bearer, you also need to be nominated to the to be a member. So if you are voting for a key office holder, please submit 2 nominations, one for the membership and CSC member, and secondly for the specific office bearer, all of which will be detailed in the email that goes out, the call for nominations. There will be a minimum of 4 weeks to reply. We're not rushing this process. The call may be for a little bit longer. So the other thing I would like to say is that the process is being managed by the people that have been introduced today, who are the members of the founding committee, under the oversight and with the help of Prime Secretariat, as well as the Global Chapter Council. So the people that you've been introduced to today will be those that actually have oversight of the process. And also to let you know that of the membership of the committee, the maximum is 15, 2 of whom we are hoping to have from the diaspora. So the diaspora is involved, and we welcome nominations from communicating members in the diaspora and elsewhere in the world. So I look forward to further engagement. I think that's as much detail as I think you need to know at the moment. But again, on the chapter website, on the Prime website, there are contact details, Sherwood's details, my details are there. Please reach out to us through those email addresses and engage with us if you have any questions. But otherwise, you respond to the call for nominations. We welcome and are looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill, and on the dot. But and I want to be grateful for my colleagues. I see them answering some of the Q&As. And thank you, Jill, for addressing all the issues. If you have been currently, if you want to be part of the Prime Chapter Africa Steering Committee, and you've been a signatory for the past, a communicating signatory for the past years, you would follow the instructions, again, Jill said. But I'm interested also to give the word to the larger audience today, who are excited as I am about this chapter and who want to join Prime Chapter Africa. I saw a question pop up, and thank you, Judy, for taking care of that one. But definitely we will, be looking to expand the network where you would become a signatory school and benefit from, again, from all the education material, all the research, all the resources, all the student activities that Prime would offer. It's definitely even open. You don't have to be a member to enjoy those, but again, we'd like you to commit to Sustainable Development Goals and Prime principles in your, business schools, and this is how we look to grow. I do want to take a moment we're 2 minutes after the time, to thank my lovely launch committee colleagues who made today happen, Ms. Jill Bogi and again, Dr. Jill Bogi and Dr. Mumbi Washira. Sharif, I see your hands up. Is that a clap? Because I want to also thank Wafat Sabri.
It was a clap, yeah.
Thank you, dear. And Wafat Sabri and Safa Abdoun from the team here at AUC who made this possible happen. So sorry for the many midnight WhatsApps or calls in the morning. All right, so thank you everyone for making this happen.